Hello and welcome Chandrika Gibson to the Stop, Collaborate and Listen interview sessions. So I'm really pleased to welcome Chandrika Gibson to you today. She has many accolades, and I've got a piece of paper because I want to read out some of the highlights. All of her accolades and all of her details I'll post onto the show notes, so be sure to have a look at that. By means of introduction, Chandrika Gibson has over 20 years of experience in the complementary and integrative health field. Her formal qualifications include an advanced diploma of applied science in naturopathy, a master's in wellness, as well as recognized qualifications to become a yoga teacher, as well as yoga therapist. Chandrika is recognized as an ethical, trusted leader and sought after as a speaker, writer, and educator. In her own business, Surya Health, which was founded in 2001, Chandrika provides cancer wellness coaching, yoga therapy, and regular yoga classes with an emphasis and a real true emphasis on inclusion, accessibility, and compassion. Chandrika creates quite a community through her business. Chandrika's mission is to alleviate the suffering experienced by people diagnosed with cancer. She's seen and has worked as a patient education coordinator at the Cancer Council of WA, the director of client services at Cancer Support WA, as a research and education consultant, and recently stepping up to act as the CEO of Solaris Cancer Care. Chandrika is soon to be a doctor, Dr. Chandrika Gibson, and Chandrika is currently working on her PhD. I'd like to give full disclosure here and say that Chandrika is my yoga teacher. I have been going to Chandrika since I moved to Perth. Gosh, in 2008, I think that was Chandrika, that I was on the mat with you since then, and I have been since then. It's been a long time. I've seen Chandrika grow through her career and pivot through various aspects. And what I really want to do today, as Chandrika is my yoga teacher, one thing I found after our yoga classes, Chandrika, is that I sleep so well. I know we can talk about lots of things. I'd like to talk about sleep and how sleep has really changed in the current climate, given that work and home boundaries have pretty much merged all into one, thanks to everything that's happened this year. And the separation of work and home is really affecting many people in relation to sleep. So the topic of this conversation is Sweet Dreams Are Made of This, Chandrika. Tell us, pursuing one's wellness journey in order to be one's best self at work.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for that wonderful intro, Nidra.
You're welcome.
You and I do go back a long way, and it's lovely to have had this relationship that is not really just a student-teacher relationship. You are definitely a friend and a colleague and a key part of the community, which I have tried to foster around Surya Health, but also broader than that. I guess in Perth, Western Australia, the community of people interested in self-development, that's really the bigger picture that we both fit into. So this topic is a good one, because without adequate rest, without enough sleep, I don't think any of us can live up to our potential, live out our mission, our purpose, our dharma in life. It all gets waylaid if we're not getting enough rest. So I do think sleep is, it's a key ingredient to a good life, and it's probably an underemphasized ingredient, especially. Well, it depends what perspective you're coming from. But I think, people have different levels of responsibility in their home life as well as in their professional life. So sleep is often the thing that people think they can get away with sacrificing. And I know I've done it myself. But there's not enough hours in the day, so I'm going to have to get up an hour earlier and either do work or do exercise or fit in the things that are important to me by sleeping less. And that is definitely a false economy.
Completely so, Chandrika. And have you noticed, especially you see many clients through your own professional work, through your own business, have people spoken to you about how their sleep patterns have changed of late, given that we're working from home far more, and home and work are just all one thing now for many of us?
Yes, I think that is a big part of the problem. And I think, I'm hearing anecdotally all kinds of ways that people are working now, working from bed, staying in their jammies. That all sounds lovely. It sounds like, the freedom and the luxury that we've all been wanting in a way. So it's an upside to the lockdowns and to COVID and to the embracing of work from home patterns. But I also think that ultimately it backfires because of what you're saying, that there's not enough compartmentalizing, there's not enough separation. And then your work and your work responsibilities do bleed into everything. So now bed is not even a sacred space where you're, reading for pleasure or connecting with a partner or cuddling children or pets or whatever else good things that happen in the bedroom. Now work is there too, on phones and laptops and iPads and computers. That's not going to be good long term for anybody.
That boundary is completely blurred now. And whilst technology is our friend, often it could also be our foe.
Yes, and look, there is some interesting research being done about sleep patterns. Probably the most compelling research for those who are looking for kind of evidence of whether it matters, the most compelling evidence I've ever come across is come out of the nurses study, which is a very long-term study of people who work as professional nurses. It was largely a female cohort, but obviously as life and times have evolved, it's a mixed cohort of nurses. And one of the studies found, or one of the, pulling out of data from that massive collection of data, found that the more night shift nurses do, the more risk they have of chronic illness, in particular cancer. And the mechanism for that is thought to be to do with your melatonin. So you really want your melatonin to be inhibited at night when it's dark so you can sleep. That's what we need to really get adequate rest. We need our whole nervous system and the hormones that interact very closely with our nervous system to be balanced. That means getting and staying somewhat connected to the natural rhythms, and that's what we disconnect from when we live our lives online. I know for me, time can just disappear. I'll be scrolling through something, reading something of interest, and an hour has passed.
Yeah.
And that happens, right? And it's good if we're
Yes.
getting into flow, we're getting engaged with what we're doing.
Yeah.
But it's not so good if it means that we don't stop and say, okay, the sun is setting. That should be the signal to my brain-body complex to unwind now.
Yeah.
And so I break up my own days by teaching yoga in the evenings. That helps me get off my computer, although obviously since everything happened, I'm also using Zoom for my laptop.
Yes.
So I'm teaching yoga even on a computer.
Yes. So all of your classes are accessible online also now, Chandrika?
Yes, they are. Yes. And look, I think there's been more benefits than downsides to that. But in terms of that winding down in the evening, that's where I think a lot of us, we don't know how to relax. We feel like, we're looking at our screens to do our work. And then what is relaxation for most people? It's kind of vegging out and watching something. Even if you're not on the same device, I mean, I sometimes think, gosh, it's just arbitrary. I've gone from a screen this size in my office to the next room to a bigger screen to watch some lovely program or a series or a documentary with my loved ones. I'm still doing the same activity. And for my brain, the level of stress it hasn't come down because our nervous systems are the same as our ancestors' nervous systems. And so the amount of stimuli we're getting through our sense organs, that's what our body finds stressful.
Right.
So we need to get into our dark and cozy cave where there's not much sensory input, maybe a fire, some warmth, some people, some food, but not the overwhelming influx of information, thoughts, ideas, conversations. I mean, we love it. We're all hooked in a way on that stimuli. But for our ancient brains, our autonomic nervous system, it just doesn't compute.
No. So Chandrika, you are well versed in the science of Ayurveda. What can yoga and its sister science, Ayurveda, offer to help us access the healing power of a decent night's sleep?
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot in the literature, and I find it amazing because this knowledge comes from the Vedic times. So we're talking about 5,000 odd years back in history, long before Zoom meetings, long before living our lives online, long before Netflix and chill was a thing. And yet, those yogis of old and those Ayurvedic doctors of old, they still thought that people had this same problem. And the way that they phrased it was that it's about vata excess. So too much of the elements of air and wind and activity and not enough stillness, calmness, quiet, introversion, the balancing aspects. So this idea of vata it's difficult to encapsulate actually because there's a whole science behind it. But essentially what the Ayurvedic practitioners were saying were that people are governed by the elements of nature, and different constitutional types will have more or less of these elements showing up in them. So a very grounded, earthed person might be called a kapha type, where earth and water are the dominant elements. And those people are quite steady, stable, not very reactive people. When someone is more dominated by the elements of fire and air, they're inclined to be what's termed a pitta constitutional type. That can have lots of strengths, lots of focus, lots of determination, but can also burn out easily through overdoing things, overwork. So we see a lot of that in modern life. Lots of pitta. In fact, pitta gets rewarded in modern life. If you want to, strive in your career, you want to embrace that pitta fire and focus and determination. Then we have the Vata type, and the Vata type is also quite preferenced in society, not least because the Vata constitution goes with a body type that is typically long and lean, a lighter built body. So it looks like what we're conditioned to see in media a lot. So people think they want more Vata. They want to be this kind of light and airy, maybe skimming across the surface of things, constitutional type.
Yeah.
But that is also unsustainable, because Vata needs to be grounded in something a bit more solid and earthy. So you actually want, if you're a very Vata person, very quick thinking, quick speaking, quick to make connections kind of person, in balance, that's fine. But for most people with a Vata excess, it goes out of balance, and that quickness of mind becomes anxiety or ruminating thoughts, worrying, going over and over, the conversations. I think we all do it to some extent. That's the nature of the mind, but it can easily get out of control. And so the Ayurvedic practitioners call this Vata excess, or they have a funny word for it, Vata derangement.
Ooh, Vata derangement. I love that.
It sounds probably more pathological than it's meant to be.
Sometimes it feels pathological if you've not had much sleep. Yep.
Yeah, so not sleeping is part of that picture, not kind of grounding yourself through eating the right foods. So people that are living on, either sugary hits or just small amounts of food, eating a bit like a bird, it goes with that high stress state. And then you wind up with some digestive issues. Vata are also prone to having some bloating, some wind kind of problems. They also, when they go out of balance, are prone to dryness. So dryness of the skin and the mucous membranes and the hair. And it feels like being dried out when you've gone through one of those phases of being just hyper driven, hyper active, hyper in your thinking. It feels like everything gets dry. You lose that inner well of juice and the parts of you. So you termed this, wanting to be one's best self.
Yeah.
I think when you get into that Vata derangement, you lose touch with your best self potentially.
And that's really fascinating, the Vata type and the Vata kind of energy. A lot of my clients, especially in the coaching field where I'm coaching leaders one-to-one, thanks to COVID, have had to just ramp up their leadership. And now, things have stabilized a bit. But now I'm seeing the burnout, and now I'm seeing everything play out. So whilst COVID was happening, yep, people responded completely. I mean, COVID is still happening. But now that we understand more and the working world is a little bit more settled, things are happening now with especially some of the leaders that I'm supporting, where they're really feeling it.
And so maybe you would see then that they haven't kept any reserves.
Right.
Your kapha aspect is really your keeping in reserve. It's keeping that juiciness, that well that you can draw on anytime. So getting back to the kind of cycles of daily life, in Ayurveda and in yoga therapy as well, we call this dinacharya. It's having a sensible and wise daily pattern. And that's going to look different for everybody. And I know, there's lots of stuff in the leadership literature about people's morning routines, and that's fine if that suits certain, types of people and lifestyles, but it doesn't have to be waking up early to go through a ritual or an exercise or a meditation. It doesn't have to look like that. It can look many different ways for many different people, but what we might be seeking, so if I was coming at it from a yoga therapy perspective, I would be seeking to bring out the best in their constitution and shore up what is their weaker area. So if they are getting into this Vata derangement, then they've got some strengths there that we can draw on, which is we think that they're going to be quite a bright, intelligent person you can connect with intellectually. But where their deficiency is in being steady, stable, grounded, and having a deeper well to draw on. So I would be pointing them towards all of the kind of grounding and juiciness increasing practices of yoga and Ayurveda. Again, that looks different for different individuals, but typically it means actually touching the earth. So getting your shoes off and putting your feet on the ground, You referred before to the month or so I spent being acting CEO, and I did think I got
Yes.
into Vata excess in that role, partly because I was upstairs, so I was in the top corner office,
Yeah.
and also wearing high heels,
Yeah.
and I just felt like I was off the ground. And
Yeah.
when I came home, I really wanted to take those high heels off for lots of reasons.
Yeah.
And really sink my feet into the earth. To feel the grass beneath your feet sounds really simple, but is actually a very sophisticated grounding technique. It's similar to how animals discharge their stress and tension. They lie on the earth, and the earth has its own, massive electromagnetic field. And more than that, though, there's the subtle aspect of what the earth represents to us. So if we can let go of some of our need for control and running after things and feel our feet on the ground and remember that the earth is supporting us and that we can't really fight gravity. We can jump up and down as many times as we like till we get fatigued, but really we want to rest and let the earth hold us for a while. So feet on the ground. And then things that you consume make a lot of difference in terms of this balancing of the elements for the individual. So really we want to steer ourselves towards really well-cooked root vegetables, things that grow under the ground. We get that earthy element again. Plus root vegetables are full of water, so we want to hydrate. That Vata excess dries us out, and so we want to get juicy and grounded through, roast vegetable soups, roast vegetable salads. You can turn it into whatever you like. And other, decent protein containing foods as well. And people, again, choose based on their own philosophy and culture and history. But it's important to get the building blocks of your neurotransmitters for your brain. So you want to have all your amino acids, the whole spectrum of them, which might come through things like, lentils and rice and grains. Beans and grains combined give you complete protein, or could come from a more animal-based protein, egg or fish or meats, if that's what people are choosing to consume. But all of those protein-containing foods are also really grounding. So that's the kind of self-care we're looking for. If you can ground yourself with some physical movement, getting your feet on the ground, nurture yourself with well-cooked food, and perhaps even a little bit more oil in your food. It sounds counter to modern health advice, I know, but if you're getting that kind of Vata spinning out of control dryness, ground yourself with, real butter or ghee or olive oil. So you want to just get yourself really nourished on every level. And then the sleep should follow quite naturally. But doesn't always. You might have to play with the process, play with the timing, figure out when to do your exercise. Exercise is always going to matter. When to eat. So if you're having digestive weakness as a side effect of your stress response, so forget about the Ayurvedic, even however you frame it, whatever model you're looking at yourself through, your digestive system is really closely tied to your nervous system and to your stress responses. So you really want to calm down over your meals, and that might mean you have to delegate, or you have to order things in. You can't do everything, so people will prioritize what matters to them. You might find that eating in the middle of the day is better than eating in the evening, especially if you're having some digestive weakness. So according to Ayurveda, again, that's when your digestive Agni is at its peak, when the sun is at its peak. So you can use that kind of fire and heat energy in the middle of the day to have your bigger meal, then perhaps eat more lightly in the evenings. That helps some people with the getting to sleep issues.
Absolutely. And Chandrika, like I said, I've been going to your classes since 2008, and my career has been chilled out, it's been stressy, it's been independent, it's been back in the workforce, it's been as my own boss. You've seen me throughout my whole career. One of the things that I have always found whilst we're talking about being grounded is that when I am in the class, when I am on the mat, that's just it. It's me and the mat. And my mind, there's just something about yoga and your classes, which I love, that just whatever stress is happening within my life or within that day, my mind just switches off and focuses on where I am and the class itself. So grounding in that respect has been quite something for me. One of the things you do in our classes, and I want to ask you a little bit more about, is that you get us to self-massage. Can you tell me about the power of massage, or even self-massage, Chandrika?
Sure. Look, that is a part of traditional yoga that is often neglected. And I like it because I think that we don't offer ourselves that level of care very often. I think we say the word self-care a lot, And the reality is most of us don't give ourselves very much self-care. Most of us are pretty mean and harsh to ourselves in the way we talk to ourselves. So what I like to do as part of kind of closing up a class, getting towards the end, is to get hands connecting. According to yogic physiology, your hands are the motor organs of your heart. And it feels true. Again, these things you can't prove. This isn't evidence-based. This is traditional wisdom knowledge.
Yep.
But the idea is that this is how we express our hearts, truly. If you love someone, you want to reach out and touch them. I mean, this is part of the issue people are facing in these COVID times, is where do we draw the line about touch? What is safe touch? What is healthy touch? What is necessary touch? And I do think human beings need touch. But it comes obviously as a package deal when it comes from someone else.
Yep.
So when we can give it to ourselves, I really think that is powerful. It's a symbol to ourselves. I can give myself what I need. The resources for my healing, my rest, they're within me. I don't need to get it outside myself. So yes, it's nice to book in and have someone else rub your feet or have a loved one do it for you. But again, it could be a package deal. So do it to yourself. And then it's not transactional. It's a true gift. You are touching your own feet. You are massaging. You are giving yourself nurturing.
Yeah.
That is very powerful, along with
Literally, yeah.
the kinds of, there's a whole map of the mama points that is similar to the acupoints in traditional Chinese medicine. There's this idea of the fascia, the connective tissue that you're connecting with. So there's all kinds of physiological benefits that potentially come from that. But to me, it's the psychological aspect of giving something to yourself without expectation of anything in exchange.
Amazing. Another really, really powerful thing, and one of the things I love about all of the terms that you offer, is at the end of the term, you'll offer a yoga nidra class. Now, for people who don't know what yoga nidra is, can you explain that? And can you explain the power of a yoga nidra for sleep? I am a zombie after that. It's the best night's sleep I ever have after a yoga nidra, Chandrika.
Yes, it is really good stuff.
Yeah.
Look, I've been practicing them myself for 20 odd years. I think that, again, we don't have much time in our lives where we are truly resting without any sensory input. Most of us, we don't know how to do that. We're always watching something, reading something. I know I'm a little bit compulsive about reading. I hardly ever just lie around and look at the trees out the window. So a yoga nidra is a structure that allows people to take constructive rest without distraction. You can do them at different lengths, but a classical yoga nidra is 45 minutes to an hour. So it's quite a long guided relaxation. So along with, again, the kind of self-care benefits of setting aside that much time to just be, to lie down. You're not trying to get any benefit from exercise. You're not trying to get fitter, stronger, look a certain way. It is true rest, and you make yourself really comfortable, and then you get guided. And the person guiding you is taking you on a bit of a journey. Now, there's different elements to the yoga nidra. Yoga nidra typically is translated to mean yogic sleep, and some people do fall asleep. And they report having a really great sleep for 40 minutes or so.
Sometimes, yep.
Yeah. Sometimes we'll have put some creative visualization in there in the middle as a little test, and you'll all come out of it and say, what? No, I didn't visualize anything. But yeah, mostly you miss that. So it's yogic sleep, but it's not really sleep. It's a state of consciousness that is called in Sanskrit turiya, but really it's the closest to a hypnagogic state, the same level of awareness that you might go into when being hypnotized. But of course, your guide is not getting you to quack like a duck or anything silly like that. Instead, we're allowing the kind of surface level of mental junk to get filtered off. It doesn't take long. Once you start to rotate your consciousness around the body, you tend to find that the day-to-day thinking slows right down or shuts up completely. Of course, if you've really got something going on in your life, you can override it to some extent, and you will still have some intrusive thoughts potentially. But for most people, the pattern of yoga nidra, from a guided relaxation to a rotation of consciousness, and then they have different elements where you might go into cultivating sensations like heaviness and lightness, heat and cold. Then you might go into visualizing, so watching what you can project in your kind of inner vision. And that is meant to discharge the kind of archetypal memories that we all carry, the things that unite us in our common humanity. That's what you might visualize. So everybody's seen a cat stretching, a rose blooming. We have these kind of symbolic images that we've all come across in our lives. Hopefully they're not triggers for big stories. That is a risk, but usually people just see them, they come, they go, they come, they go. And that is a way of kind of cleansing the layers of the conscious mind so you can sink beneath your conscious mind. Yoga Nidra is not a sleep at all, but it is a dreamlike state where you enter your own inner world. And that is yours. That is a sacred place for you that nobody else can intrude upon. And so the cues you might be given include setting a sankalpa, setting a clear intention for yourself. I'm not particularly superstitious, and I don't think I subscribe to too much magical thinking, but 20 odd years ago, I set a sankalpa that I have repeated quite regularly over the years. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I feel like it's coming true. No, stick to the rules. So maybe I am a bit superstitious because it's yours. That's where you go inside yourself. That isn't for anyone else.
Okay. Yeah, yoga nidras are very, very powerful, and I honestly feel like I'm walking on air afterwards, and for that whole week after it, you know, we're talking about energy reserves earlier, that just boosts my energy up, and I've got full battery to keep going for quite a while. But yes, we have to remember self-care throughout as well, not just deplete our energy.
Yeah, so we don't want to do these things as band-aids, but sometimes, you know, we recognise the patterns we're getting into and we know we need to do some of our self-medication in the right way, in the healthy way. And so that does serve that purpose. And also what you said, yeah, you feel deeply rested. That is one of the kind of maxims, again, can't be proven, but there are all these kind of sayings about an hour of yoga nidra might be equivalent to 4 hours of deep sleep. And it feels true, feels pretty refreshing.
Yes. Chandrika, my final question for you is, do you have a nighttime routine? What's your wind down routine?
Oh, well, I'd like to say I have a perfect evening wind down routine, but not really. After I teach yoga, I do have a little bit of a ritual, and that is to share some kind of drink with my partner. So that is, at the moment, we're into kombucha. So we will sit out on our deck if it's nice, or sit inside by the fire if it's been cold, and share a kombucha and a little bit of a debrief about our day. Now, I'll be completely honest with you, at different times that is a glass of wine, and other times it's a cup of tea or a herbal tea, but we share something, a nice, usually a warm or nurturing drink of some kind, and a little bit of a debrief. And that is without screens. That's the kind of a little brief respite in our days. And then we'll either hang out and read, or maybe play a game of Scrabble, or talk some more, or watch something. And then we take ourselves to bed. And I have taught myself, finally, to not read in bed. I've always been someone who read to sleep all through my childhood, but then as my vision decreased as I got older into my 40s, I've needed stronger and stronger glasses. And so I started to read on a Kindle, so it was backlit. And my partner would say that he found that quite distracting. He didn't really enjoy having the backlit screen, and I would change the light to sepia, and I'd be, trying not to disturb him. Yeah. But in truth, I knew I was disturbing myself. I knew that I was having like a second wind of stimuli once I got into bed and opened up a backlit screen. So I'm not reading in bed anymore. I'm going to bed.
Yep.
And yeah, probably don't have all the perfect sleep hygiene things, but our bedroom is a really nice space. The windows are open. The cats come and lie on the blanket and make a little heavy weight, and that's always really nice too.
Yeah.
I do, if I'm suffering from anxiety, use a weighted blanket. That hasn't been too much of an issue in recent times, but I love that heaviness. So something heavy, something textured, soft, nice, comforting, cozy, all of that helps me settle in the evenings.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Chandrika. While we have focused on the topic of sleep for this session, I know you talk about so much more, and you are qualified in so much more also Chandrika. So if people want to contact you, I will add all of your contact details into the show notes. And thank you so much for today. I really appreciate your time and your knowledge.
Thanks so much for having me, Prina. It's always lovely to chat with you. And yeah, people can find me in all those places, and I hope some of it's been helpful.
Definitely so. Thank you, Chandrika.
Thank you. I'll see you soon.
Definitely.